Okay, this is our weekly 4D class. I thought might be useful to ask, and I invited questions from anybody. Maybe we can, my plan for today was this slide set is almost finished. I think it's been, surely I've enjoyed and beneficial for you for the kind of review work we've done and going over the basics. But I thought today I would first take any questions from the floor. And second, we'll complete this slide set. It's only half a dozen slides left. And then go back to where we were 4 or 5 weeks ago, looking at the user reports and going to look at Galena's work in Russia. Sound good? Larisa?
Oh, yeah.
Nico?
All good?
Yeah, all good.
And any questions?
Nope.
I don't have any questions today.
Okay.
Probably will by the end.
Okay, good. I love your questions, so keep them coming. This is a slide I've shown you several times. This is, I think this is the most incredible piece of data. And, you know, Richard Feynman commonly says there's no science in social science. Well, this is science and social science. So again, we had in rough numbers, 200 teams that use this tool multiple times. And we grouped the approximately 40 teams. It might have been 39 in some cases, but I think around the number 40 teams who started in the bottom quintile. And that offset is real. That's just, if you did 1,000 teams, that diamond would probably be in the center there, but a little bit of data, just kind of small number data. And what happened when they did the repetitive online assessments, these things take median 15 minutes, answer 10 questions. And again, this blew my mind. Even more importantly, if we did workshops for bottom quintile teams, they were after this. We don't do them when they're down here. So workshops were happening in here, which I thought was the most powerful tool we had. And actually, this is working with them as consultants to get rid of the 7 deadly sins. And then the progress here was not statistically relevant, but great. So every team that started in the bottom improved over the period. I'd say they were doing these like once a quarter typically. So this is about, let's say a year later, maybe a year and a half later, moved up into decent performance. And the calculation is 7%. And I would not present these data if I didn't have the anecdotal evidence to back it up. In other words, I was getting report from, these are mostly project teams, engineering teams. I wasn't getting reports from the leaders that their performance as perceived by themselves and others, the social context, the comfortableness at work, everything you care about wasn't advancing monotonically with these numbers. I wouldn't take this as seriously. And I don't know that the 7% is exactly performance improvement in the sense that you save, let's say, 7% more work per unit dollar. But I know it's something like that. So this is quite incredible. And when I saw this, Skip Borst did this work. I said, wait a minute, you started here, so there's no room over here. So if we had just some random walk, it's going to have to move over in this direction somehow. Then he said, I did the teams that started here. Just to everybody clear about what we're showing here, these are the 40 teams that started here. What happened? He reanalyzed this annually. He didn't redo the chart. I don't think the chart was quite as impressive as this one, but he confirmed to me as we got more data that the basic idea is still working. So this was so powerful that I couldn't believe this. I mean, so at that day, I made all of our intellectual property public, which turned out to be a good thing, I think, in lots of ways, and started writing the manuscript for the book, which published a year later. Everybody understand this chart?
One quick question. So
Yeah.
the bottom two quintiles is when you're consulting on the seven deadly sins, which I
O-
need to
Only here. So if
only in the bottom quintile.
only the bottom quintile. So
Okay.
what I discovered was that, so I'm doing workshops with these people. Early on, I did workshops with these people down here. And frankly, it was unpleasant. I don't think they got much out of it. They're too broken. And,
Right.
and just might be worth reiterating this. So the time I had center project managers in each of eight NASA centers, and I got them together and said, what are the common things that you're seeing with teams that are down here? Because they all had them. And we had like a telecon, and I already had pretty much this clear in my mind, but I wanted their input. And the things that cause teams to be down here are things like the budget is woefully inadequate. So if you're there you're under a lot of pressure to produce something that's going to launch on time, on schedule, and you can't possibly get there with the money. That's something that you can't fix with an online assessment. Another one was when the project is technically impossible. And Frank's talked on our telecons a couple of times about this Larisa project, which is a interferometer in space to measure gravitational waves rather. And it finally collapsed because technically it was too difficult. You have to measure hydrogen atom-sized displacements on mirrors that are spaced, 100,000 miles apart. And so technically couldn't be done. So at that point, I just said you should quit. By the way, the remedy when you don't have enough money is to make a 4D request for the money or forget about it, cancel the project. Otherwise, just sit in misery. Another one is when the project manager is incompetent at project management. And how does that happen? Well, technical organizations tend to reward technical performers. And so people who do great technical work get put into project management jobs. It looks like a really fun job. It's one of the hardest jobs in the world. It's a great respect for people that do this. And they would tell me, so what I would do if that was a question, I'd run an individual one on that person. If they ended up in the bottom quintiles, I'd say, what's going on? And what I heard was, I don't like to work with people. I don't like projects. It looked like fun. It's not. So I'd go with management to them and get them replaced by somebody who wanted to do this and get them back on a technical track. Another one is when the organization can't do systems engineering. So in space projects, more than most things, you need to consider the whole system. It's kind of like, at a much lesser level, you do it with a solar panel install. You have to look at the geometry of the roof and where the cabling can go and how it's all going to work together. In space, everything is highly constrained. Weight is highly constrained. The structure is very difficult because launch vehicles vibrate the hell out of everything. You have a limited capacity to get power from solar panels. You got problem to reject heat. You have to do that with radiators pointed in deep space, and everything interacts. So that's sort of typical of those things. So, but what I would do is I would take a piece of paper and put this in front of the project manager. Well, I've got a team down here, and say, what's going on? And they knew it. They could tell me. So, so once we got past that, we'd measure. Here they've improved. We've dealt with the things the way I described. There's 7 of them turned out, and I call them 7 deadly sins just for fun. And from that point on, they're good to go. So here, I deemed it good enough that we did a workshop here. Workshops normally occurred after the first measurement. That's most of the time. So the workshops are believed to be effective because they're familiar from academia. That's how we go to school, go to classes. But and I think they're worthwhile in terms of the team building aspect, providing a common vocabulary to talk about this. That's a really important part of this whole thing. There's no vocabulary for social science that's consistent. So thanks for asking. That's the answer to that. So that's why, after 1 or 2 disastrous workshops, I said, I don't do any more workshops until you do this first. because there are people that put on facades of things they're really doing well and they're not. So anyway, there we are. Move on. So just to give some intuitive sense of what these are like, the red bottom benchmarks are full of criticism. There's no appreciation, and there's no alignment, because in these environments, people aren't going to communicate about difficult things because they just get beat up for it. We talked about how exclusion creates anger and mistrust. And the idea of instead of addressing unfortunate realities, you have blind optimism. And finally, instead of focusing on the actions needed to be done, you're full of blaming and complaining. And again, the problem with drama states is that they misdirect your energy. Blaming is deadly, and you're blaming someone else for something you're angry about in yourself. And complaining takes you into victim. It's hopeless, nothing I can do. And in contrast, appreciation and with open communication about difficult issues, you have alignment. Everybody feels included, trust is high, reality with 100% commitment, and finally, your response able. So I just put this in here as a kind of when people ask me, have you got studies of showing that bottom quintile teams have more cost per unit something than higher quintile teams? I said no. And the reason is that there's too many confounding variables. To do this work, you'd need to have a major longitudinal study, cost millions of dollars, and back out all the other contributing factors like the institutional effects, the adequacy of the budget, on and on and on. So I think that my best way to kind of persuade people is look at this and say, can you understand, can you imagine being in this context or this context, which would be higher performance? And I think as an expression in mathematics, the proof is intuitive and left to the reader. So, okay. And then I was thinking about something that Frank Martin and I are very different in our mindsets than the NASA of today. I think neither of us would have a lot of trouble working in a place that's bureaucratic, and diversity is more important than technical performance. It's important, but I would put technical performance at the pinnacle. And I think the reason is that people who were in NASA during Apollo are different. It was a can-do mindset. If anyone challenges something, the typical thought we had was, we're going to the moon, get out of the way. If you got a problem, call the president. And that was the sort of mindset that led to the success of Apollo. I think Nico talked about admiration for Apollo. It was the mindset that the president, a well-liked president who'd been assassinated, committed to this, and we need to honor that. And so that's when you have a green social context, you're developing people. They're becoming better leaders. Most of my staff, when I left the astrophysics division, went on to bigger jobs. And these red social contexts are damaging people. The longer you sit in here, the more debilitated you become. So the point of this slide is that I've put the focus of this material on team performance, because that's what people want in the short term, the people who are willing to undertake this work. But I think the bigger question is, what do you do to the workforce over time? And it's destructive. You cannot tolerate organizations with red social contexts. They're damaging. Make sense? So the individual tools, I didn't talk much about this, but someone asked me about them recently. They didn't even know they existed. So this actually came first. It's exactly the same measurement, except that it's asking about an individual's behaviors instead of group behavioral norms. And we always use telephone coaching with these. I had 8 coaches, master certified coaches, when the company was running. And these are focus sessions on specific behaviors. We take the IDA data, just like I showed you before, and let's say the person has a problem keeping agreements. Well, the coach would focus on that behavior primarily, and other work situations. And here's the beauty of these tools. You track and record behavioral change progress. And it took some complicated math, not that all that difficult, but it wasn't simple to get through the noise of this. And I benchmarked the 8 coaches against each other, and anybody that was significantly below the mean in terms of changing behavior got removed. I don't know anybody else that can offer this, that you've got a tool where you have coaching going on, and coaching's confidential. We don't get any information about the sessions and don't need it. But the idea that I can warrant to people that this is going to work because I've got data from the history of this coach is effective. And then what's interesting, benchmark the coaches, if I talked about that. I thought it's interesting that the benchmarking curve for the individuals is pretty good Gaussian normal distribution, and the team is slanted much more negatively. So this was something that I pondered for a long time and decided that people behave better as individuals than they do in groups. You can watch the political parties and the crazy things they're doing. These are good individuals that people respect and like and voted for. You put them in the group and it tends to go to the lowest common denominator. My sort of intuitive reference for this is that you want to have a romantic dinner with your spouse on an anniversary. Would you rather be in a restaurant next to a table of 30 people or in a restaurant with 15 tables with couples? And what happens at the table of 30 people, you know, people yell and carry on and behave in ways they would never do. So this was just a sort of an interesting finding in all this. Comments, questions?
So remind me, the IDA is essentially the same questions, but instead of focusing on the group's dynamic, it's still the group that's doing the assessment, but they're focused on typically the leader.
No, so in the when we had the NASA contract full bore, everybody got an IDA and a coaching session before they went to a workshop.
Oh, okay.
So in an ideal world, that's what we did, and the cost of these things is insignificant compared to the cost of space projects.
Yeah.
So later, when I'm working with commercial customers, I would say that you ought to definitely do the IDAs on the influencers in the project. And there are people influenced by their hierarchical position. There are people who are influenced by their technical expertise, and there are people influenced by their personalities. So these are people that are the principal individual drivers of what your team social context is going to wind up being. And
So is the person testing themselves?
no, yes, they are, but also you get about 10 people. And the way you pick them is people who know you well enough to answer, and people whose opinion is important. So this is what's commonly called a 360 in the parlance of this work.
I was gonna ask if that's similar to a 360. Okay.
A 360, just the only thing that means is that when you do this, you get your bosses, the people under you, and the people, your peers. So I would do that similarly. And I would include your spouse in this thing. I think that's an interesting conversation. And of course, just like the others, the data are anonymous. But when I did this kind of work, I put someone in there that I knew disliked me intensely. It was easy to find their responses, you know. So, and again, you're not trying to. It's not a test in a sense. You get a score you pass fail on. When I saw this person's comment, I said, "Yeah, that's her, all right." And do I care enough to modify for her? I don't. So I'm not going to, but it's information, and that was kind of a liability in the sense that she had certain kinds of power, but I chose not to deal with it. So.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Typically with the team level, it's everybody that's under a single supervisor. for individuals, it could be people you don't work with anymore. It could be someone in a job you left last year, but they know you pretty well. So what you want is people who know enough to respond intelligently, and at the same and someone whose opinion might matter for one reason or another. So you might be friendly with the UPS driver, but their opinion doesn't matter much. So
Charlie, can I ask a question?
nope.
Okay.
Of course you can ask a question.
All right, but it's always bothered me to think about using your example of identifying the person who is not really, I don't know, big fan of yours or something like that, but their opinion still will affect the score.
Yeah, that's right. The
And
score, you're not trying to get the best score. You're just trying to get information.
yeah, but it means you can, to a certain degree, manipulate the score because you can really,
You can pick only people who like you and get a better score.
exactly.
The score is only information for you and your coach. Nobody else has it. So if that's what you want to do, go ahead. I can't. There's a kind of a rule: don't try and control anything you can't control. So who they pick, I have no idea about who their relationships. So it's up to them to decide what information they want. And I wanted the information from this. I wanted to know more about this person who disliked me, and we were combative openly, and get feedback just so I understood the problem better, and could choose what I wanted to do about it. So you're not the mindset shift is really difficult here, but this tool is that we're used to wanting to score highly on whatever we do, because that's a lifelong habit, a math test or get a good grade or whatever. So that's not what this is about. This is about getting information for your choices and your personal development.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I like to include the spouse just because for most of us, that's an important relationship, and you should be able to have an honest conversation about they'll probably offer up what they put in the report, but that's not it's important to see how are you behaving. I had a big falling out with our architect early on, and he wouldn't keep agreements, and that's us. I called him up and said, if you keep doing this, we're going to cancel this project. I'll stop the house build. I'll go find a remodel and get another architect to remodel a house. And he took it really well. I was surprised. We had an hour conversation about it. And the next day I saw him, or a couple of days later, he said, I told my wife what you told me. And I said, interesting. What did she say? She said, it's about time someone told you that. so
Yeah, that's very good.
So
Oh, personally, I'm always open for criticism, and that's why
yeah,
years ago when I want to know the truth. So
that's it.
out of the dozen people, I always try to really put 6 people who I know that really admire me and things of that, and 6 people who have criticized me. So I really want to have a clear picture.
I think that's the mindset that works here. I mean, it's about that's the point. It's not about getting a better score.
Yeah, yeah.
And I leave it up. It's I give this advice, but I don't push people other than say, this is what you ought to do. And if someone wants to, it might be that they're not able to hear the negatives. And so that they may feel too vulnerable. And so maybe when they do the next one, they would do it differently. So, or they, I think one problem that I did not have was I don't think anybody ever worried about my integrity in keeping the data private. I don't think that ever was an issue.
Sure.
I explained to them that with the team data particularly, whenever I would go work with the NASA center, I'd go talk to the center director and say, there's 2 rules here. One is that I'm not going to work with someone that you want me to work with if they don't want to do it. And secondly, I'll never share these scores with you. The exception was that sometimes team leaders said, go tell the management about my scores. In that case, I would. I often had a debriefing um, with the top management about the work that I was doing. I would say I'm working with these teams, blah, 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 so you know. And this particular team asked me to share their data. They're excellent. This team leader's doing a wonderful job. And other than where people ask me to share, if you want those data, go talk to the team leader and ask them to give it to you. I don't give it. So I think the same thing with individuals. I could look at these things, people's individual scores, but I really didn't bother. The coaches had them, and the coaches shared them with the individual, and that's it. The team leader wanted to know, they weren't privy to getting it. So that's, and I think I think people have to think about this a little bit to understand this is different. This is a developmental tool. It's not an evaluative tool.
Thank you, Charlie. It was very, very useful to me. I started to work on this about 12 years ago. So, but I knew that about myself that, but I was really, really happy to confirm what I was thinking. So basically, I was too green, and I need to orange up. Too green, and I need to orange up a little bit.
There you go.
I'm gonna play the role of Darinka today and note
Yeah.
that we're at 9:30.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, on your feet. I'm on my feet already, but on your feet.
Tanya always joins me for the 40
The
salute.
exercise part.
You have to get to the same distance as me. She misses everybody.
We miss her too.
Sorry.
They miss you too.
Oh, bye.
So this is a slide I've always liked, comparing all of the money that was spent, never spent, all the things that I went to for so-called leadership development at NASA. And typically what would happen is that NASA had a training facility in a remote site, Wallop site in Virginia, and go down there for 2 weeks and typically join up with 24 people I didn't know and spend 2 weeks with academics who were doing these very entertaining exercises, and some small part of it, actually, I remember. And what would happen is I'd come back to the office, and I'm the director now, so I've got a lot of power, and start to talk about these ideas, and people didn't like them. And the problem was the context of the training environment wasn't the context of our office. And so I've talked about this a lot. I bought this when I was in Africa. I visited a tribe there and bought a really interesting kind of grotesque mask from them. And I thought it was really cool. I brought it home. My wife said, "You're not putting that in this house." So stuff that looked great in a Maasai warrior camp didn't look good in our house. So things are hard to move. And I make this analogy. This is like using tweezers to align iron filing. So what I'm talking about is they took me, which was the iron filing, to a thing that modified me. But when I came back, the field of the organization wasn't amenable with this, and I got realigned by the organization. So a better way is to use these tools and work at the team level and change the field. So in other words, do you want to try and, to get alignment or get everyone together, do you want to try and come back into an existing field as a single little magnet with 50 more around you? Or do you want to change the field that affects everybody? I hope this analogy makes sense to you. Okay. And then people ask me sometimes, you know, who's used these things? And so this is my CU classes where when I was there. I did 3 classes, 2 official and 1 unofficial, this sort of undergraduate class, and that was in, I did an MBA class, and I had a small business executive class. And my first client was Ernst & Young. So I had a big dilemma. I was supposed to go back to NASA. Thank you. 21st century leadership. Yep. So
Still have it.
great. So the faculty didn't like me, and the dean did. So he had a review of my classes by his dean's advisory committee, chaired by the CEO of Pepsi. And my students were up there talking about the class, and I'm sitting there with tears running down my face as they're talking about the effect I had on them. And the whole story's kind of interesting, but I'm going to take a lot of time with it. But the thing had no effect on the faculty. In fact, it ended my academic career, what happened in that room. But during the break, 3 CEOs came up to me and said, we want this in our company. So I decided then to leave NASA and do this work. And my first client was accounting firm, Ernst & Young. And then I did in the same, right after I left this, I did working with consultant for mostly TRW and doing workshops. And then in NASA had its 2 back-to-back Mars failures. And the administrator went to the guy who's supposed to be taking care of these kind of things, happened to know him pretty well, and said, you're going to be fired if you can't improve team performance. So I'd been doing like a workshop a year for NASA until then. And he'd been following the thing, and he was really intrigued. By now we had the TDA, the IDA, the workshop, the coaching, all that stuff at a low level. So that led to a gigantic NASA contract that went on for 14 years and did 1,500 teams. And then China, quite unexpectedly, became enormous. This started with a trip I made. China Aerospace brought me over there. They were interested in this. And that was great going until they realized that they had to do the online tool. And China has the civil program, the research program, the NASA-like part was embedded in the military. And the last thing all of their computers had no connection to outside. So the idea of using something in the US to do this, so that kind of fell apart. But in the meantime, people picked up on the free intellectual property. We're doing workshops, and I think that we definitely trained at least 100,000 people in China, and many of them are trainers. Current focus, helping others. The accelerator dashboards are in 75 plus countries. And then some memorable clients, Electricity de France, the world's largest nuclear utility. The CEO, so I had a coach and coachette who had a colleague in France, a coach in France, and she talked to him about this work, and the Electricity de France CEO got interested. He and I had a meeting in Atlanta, Georgia. He happened to be there. I flew out and met with him, and he and like 3 or 4 of his key people came over and toured half a dozen NASA centers, and this became a program installed in nuclear plants. I think they're still using it and still doing it. Then a company in London got interested in this, that they had an agent in the US that I met, and they brought me to Dubai. I did workshops in Dubai for them. Then in Boulder, financial services company, and Ball Aerospace, and things like I worked with an Australian company to rebuild the Hong Kong subway. They used 4D work. And in Novosibirsk with Airflog, that's Galena. And then companies like, I did a lot of work with China Telecom, get this, 1 million employees. So this is kind of some highlights of the people who use this. Comments, questions?
Yeah, I
This is
would like to
amazing
know-
work. Amazing work, Charlie. Congratulations and thank you.
This was great fun, frankly.
What is the possibility of doing this program with the B. Nelson movement in South Africa? Maybe you know enough about the B. Nelson movement, but we can spend time later on it as well.
Well,
But young black
can you do
community
it,
leaders.
Nico? I'm not inclined to travel there now.
No, obviously not. I can do it, but that's really a thought that's crossing my mind all the time. They're doing well on this open university.
Well, the first thing you do, what's the first step? You take data. You do, if it is, are they teams?
They work in teams now on projects, yes. But this was like experiential learning for everybody involved.
So what you do is you get a team leader who wants to do this, and that you can use this briefing or condense this. This is, I do about a slide an hour normally when I do a briefing. So this is a little over an hour. You could probably take this yourself, modify it, show them the basic ideas, and the team leader wants to do it, go work with a couple of teams. And what worked for me was that I actually went and talked to NASA project managers. That's been my background. So I talked to them about leadership, and the reason I did that is because it was the report of the Hubble Failure Review Board about flawed leadership that caused the Hubble mirror flaw. So, and they said, I don't care about leadership, I care about team performance. And that says, that's what the market wants. So that's what started the team stuff. So I would go and brief. Now I'm retired from NASA. I'm just a working guy. I get them to do a briefing, travel out there on my own money, do a little briefing. And they'd be skeptical. And I think they're right to be skeptical. This 99% of what's out there doesn't work. It's not quantitative. It's just a bunch of academic BS, in my opinion. And Frank's son corroborates this. He's got a PhD in OD, so this is the only thing that works. So skeptical. So I would then say, okay, would you like to benchmark your team performance? And almost everybody wants to do that. I wanted to do it when I was running a program. I'd like to see how my team's performing and improve their performance. I mean, of all the things that you can fix is that. So I would do a measurement, and when they saw that this was actionable data, this is called action learning, they were all in. And then when they did it for 6 months, they go tell their friends this actually works. And once that happened, the thing went viral. How do you think 1,500 teams voluntarily did this? I mean, there was no, I'd say almost no engagement of management in their choice to do this. This was solely them reaching out to us because they saw it work with other people. So that your goal ought to be to change the whole movement team by team, just like I showed you those data. And right in this slide sets exactly how to do it. So Nico, I'll help you from here, no problem. But someone's got to be on the ground to make this happen. It works. I think that almost anyone can brief a workshop module, but I want you to think about using all the tools. So you brief the idea, you get them to do the TDA, you show them the actions that come out of that, you get them to name a czar, all the stuff we've been talking about, and then they start using it, and then you can do workshop modules are easy to brief. A whole workshop is a big deal, but I'd actually start with a presenting issue and do the same work I've been doing with you, except to do the context shifting worksheet with something that the team cares about, and you're on your way. And I'll help from here as I can, but I'm not gonna get on a plane, go to Africa.
No, that's definitely not. But I can always bring Nat and Tanya and Larisa over, as
Yeah.
workshop
There you go.
facilitators. In some way, I'm going to make this work, but yeah, it's amazing to see how these guys are performing on the Open University platform with it. You know, suddenly they are among university students. I'm not sure if you can even imagine, you know, the impact on their lives. So somewhere this is going to working on it.
This is my standard closure. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And I would, if I were doing a workshop in South Africa, I would say, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful citizens committed to be a Nelson can change the world. Indeed, you might be the only people that ever will. And this is supposed to animate. So,
are you going to share this slides afterwards, like separate from the recording?
I can send you
so
all that stuff
you work with
too.
it?
But yeah, so by the way, that's actually a military march. It's commonly used for graduations, but it was written
Right.
for military purposes.
How would you break out the modules of the workshop?
I would I'd do about 2 hours at a pop, I think, you know. So there's something on the order of 600 slides in the whole thing. Let me see here.
I was about to ask if it's part of that big.
So that's about 650 minutes to do this. So I'd probably do it in, you know, the typical YouTube thing's 15 minutes. I think if you do this in 15-minute pieces, it's too disjointed. It all, what I think is probably my favorite thing about it is it's like math, it builds. So, you know, mathematics, you start with counting and you go to, you know, basic functions, multiply, divide, then you go to algebra, then you go to geometry and trigonometry, and you go to calculus. So it's kind of the same thing. You build on the idea of social context, you teach it, you use the coordinate system to simplify everything. You talk about how you can dissect social things into pieces with it. You get into the Amber process. And then you explain how the measurements work, how social context measurements work. And that's all sort of sequentially in these slides. And then you go through the 8 behaviors in order. And so I think, you know, actually there's no hard and fast thinking here, but I think a 2-hour module or even a 1-hour module is not bad. The only problem you have is that you need to get a commitment. I would record them on YouTube. It's free, just like I do. Set up a YouTube channel. I would get a commitment to people that if they miss a session, that they will watch it on YouTube before the next one. Because you don't understand, you know, how to dissect mindset into storylines and emotions, and don't understand how emotions and storylines work, you can't do the more advanced work. So you could do it. I sort of picked 2 hours as an arbitrary thing, but 1 hour would work. The big problem you have is if you, I mean, ideally you get everybody in a room for 2 days and do it. That would be the ideal thing. And
right,
early on, when the Ernst & Young lady asked me to do, basically what I did in the early days was I did the CU class, and with the PowerPoint came along sort of after that. And so when the Ernst & Young lady said, I want to do this in like once a week, 1-hour sessions. And I had a good friend, Tom Hallen, who was worked for a big consulting firm, and he and I had lunch once every couple of months and talk about things. He said, you can't do it that way with these people. He said, what's going to happen is that these are these are partners in a accounting firm, and you're not going to compete with billable hours. I mean, these are so you're going to have intermittent participation. So I went back to her and said, I can't do it the way you want. You need to do it. I can't do it like a university class. University class attendance is pretty reliable. I mean, I'd say
Right. They're paying to be there.
98% coming, right? Something like that. In fact, maybe almost 100, right? I barely remember anybody ever missing a class. And he said, that's not what's going to happen. You're going to have people that don't show up. And, frankly, when I got this realization, I kind of got scared about this. I thought it's one thing to deal with students who have to be there. And if your class looks like it's something useful, they're happy to come, versus people that are already being pushed to put billable hours on the chart, and they're trying to have families and personal lives and all that. And so the time they spend with me is a big penalty. They got to give up billable hour time to do it in these firms, the pressure is enormous for billable hours. That's the whole deal. So, and they're working long hours, most of them, younger ones particularly, are working infinite hours. So I went back and said, we got to do this in 3 days. And we negotiated and cut it down to 2.5. And they all came. So, and that workshop was a pretty good success. The client was very happy with it. But I think if you I think with YouTube, at the time I didn't have slides. I did all this talking and writing on flip charts, and that's a lot of work. Okay, to teach that way. The slides are. I had a partner at the time that the client didn't like, a woman who was a therapist. She was green, and she couldn't keep the agreements about who's going to do what in the workshop, because she liked doing the slides too, and not slides, doing the material. So it was chaotic, because we would have a lesson plan and we'd agree who's going to talk on which topics. Just had a book like the class had. She'd go talk about my topic, so I've got to sit there and in the back of the room scratching up that she's already done something she's not supposed to do, and you can't say, yeah, stop that. So the slides came along initially as a way to organize and control her. So, but it turned out to be much easier to do with slides. I had one workshop where I did it the old way for the first half and the slides for the second half. And that client said they thought me talking and writing on the flip chart was more personal. And I said, yeah, it might be, but I haven't got the energy to do that over and over. That's too much damn work compared to pushing a button and reading.
Right.
And the beauty of the slides is that I saw that I can export it with the slides. I think just like now I use the slides to remind me what to talk about. So,
right.
So the slides are pretty self-explanatory. So Nico, I think you could sit down and study them. I've also got this written document that's not quite up to date that narrates everything I'd say. You can read those documents an hour ahead and probably do the thing pretty effectively. Frank told me that once in a while he comes across something, he says, I don't remember what I'm supposed to say about this. Let's just move on. So you can also do that.
Gotta love it.
So next week we'll go back to the lessons learned from starting with Erflog, the outfit in Novosibirsk, Siberia. By the way, I saw a news article, not taking it seriously, but Siberia wants to secede from Russia. Good luck with that. But anyway, it doesn't surprise me. They're a 5-hour flight from Moscow and nothing in between. Comments, thoughts?
No, this was great. I'm gonna spend the Thanksgiving holiday digesting all of this along with my turkey. So this will be great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving
Yeah.
to all of you who are celebrating it.
You don't
Thank
do it,
you.
Melissa?
I do celebrate it with my family.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, yeah. Well, I think it's one of my intellectual friends said his mind is the most important holiday of the year because of not because we're not going to have turkey, but not because of turkey, but because of taking the time is to reflect on what you're grateful for, and
Yep.
where attention goes, power flows. And boy, do we live well.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Nico, does South Africa
Yeah.
have something similar?
Not at all. Valentine's Day is our Halloween, Thanksgiving, everything in one.
Interesting.
They really go big for Valentine's Day, but there's not anything like Thanksgiving, which is such a beautiful, thing in the culture. And I've always wondered, why don't we have it? But personally, I will have it with my American friends here on Thursday evening.
Yeah,
Looking
perfect.
forward
Yeah.
to it.
Nice.
Go ahead.
Nice.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a fall harvest celebration, right? So
Yeah,
you guys are in spring,
Yeah.
so it's a little
Yeah.
different.
Oh, spring planting
The other
celebration.
thing is, we will have to find, some like a sheep or something and beat the hell out of it until it admits to be a turkey, because there's no turkeys in South Africa.
Well, I don't think turkey is universal. We're not having turkey.
No, turkey is certainly not universal.
It's kind of, I don't know what do you think about 70% of the people have turkey?
Yeah,
Yeah.
probably.
My family has a traditional Thanksgiving holiday, and I'm vegan, just so. But I'm just.
Yeah.
But
You got
I'm.
you got a tofu turkey?
I have a tofu turkey. Yeah, you got it.
Excellent.
Thank you all, and see you next week, and we'll go back to the lessons learned work.
Sure.
Wonderful.
That
Thank you.
sounds great. Happy holidays.
Thanks, everyone.
You all.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Goodbye. Bye.